The Stockton and Darlington Railway opened in 1825. It set out with the steam-powered Locomotion No. 1 on September 27, 1825 for its 26-mile, 42-kilometer maiden voyage at a whopping 12 miles per hour, 19 kph. Contrary to the name, Stockton and Darlington, it did not set out from Stockton. It set out from Witten Park, past Darlington, and ended at Stockton, where the Tees River could carry things onward. Wagons were pulled uphill at these two locations, Etherley and Brusselton, via engines placed atop the inclines. It crossed a bridge constructed over the Gonless River here, and at least on its first trip, between 450 and 600 passengers just hung off the sides for festivity's sake. Formal passenger services were soon to come. The name Stockton and Darlington does not imply the start and end point of the railway, but rather the largest towns along the route. Darlington was a town of over 5,000. Stockton also sported a population of over 5,000 and had a seaport to keep coal loads floating on their way. The railway was originally envisioned as a way to more efficiently bring coal to the coast, and the plan was to have that coal pulled on rail, yes, as opposed to floating on an artificial canal, but also the plan was to have it pulled on rail by horses. The main man with the plan to move coal to the coast with horses was wool manufacturer and Quaker financier Edward Pease. He became involved in 1809 through efforts to improve movement of goods down the Tees River. In fact, an 1821 Act of Parliament with royal assent legislated permission for this horse-drawn rail to be built. Pease must have been pleased. But then another man with another plan appeared. His name was George Stephenson, and from my reading, he's quite the character. He was an engineer, a good salesman, and a railroad visionary. And his vision? Pull the coal with a steam locomotive. His steam locomotive. His vision of a steam elephant pulling tons and tons of coal appealed to Pease, who bought into the idea of adding a multiplier to his money, revolutionizing transportation. A modified Act of Parliament in 1823 provision for steam locomotives on this new Stockton and Darlington rail. And it provisioned for the carrying of passengers. Construction began in May 1822 over hill and over dale, whatever the heck a dale is. 3 years later, she took her maiden voyage with all that coal and all those hundreds of hangers-on. Over time, the Stockton and Darlington rail would carry many more such loads. This is, in my opinion, the first passenger railway. Funny enough, that's actually a slightly controversial take. It's useful to rule out what doesn't count as the first passenger railway. Again, in my opinion, to be honest, this video came to me while watching Star Trek reruns. The TNG episode Emergence, a train whistle interrupts Data and Picard discussing Shakespeare in the holodeck, and the thought came, it may be a little boyish,
dude, what was the first passenger train with passengers and stuff?
So, what was the first passenger railway? Moving passengers around regularly, steam a-flowing, whistle a-blowing. The most clever viewers may catch some of the subtle differences in the descriptions I'm about to give you. If you see it all on the first go, you're way quicker than I am. Here's what I googled after watching that episode. What was the first passenger train? And Wikipedia, despite what the haters say, the greatest work of intellectual altruism in human history, started my learning journey. And interestingly, Wikipedia seemed immediately at odds with the other common Googleable encyclopedia, Britannica. Wikipedia's headline implies that, quote, the Liverpool and Manchester, LNMR, was the first intercity railway in the world. That railway opened in 1830, so 5 years after the Stockton and Darlington Railway we already learned of, which opened in 1825. But if Stockton and Darlington opened 5 years earlier and had passengers, isn't Stockton and Darlington the first passenger railway? That would make Wikipedia wrong. The next Google result from Britannica seems to confirm our answer. The quote, Stockton and Darlington Railway in England was the first railway in the world to operate freight and passenger service with steam traction. Okay, so this result says Stockton and Darlington Railway was first, not the Liverpool and Manchester Railway. But here's an academic source from 2001 which contradicts us again. Quote, the modern concept of the public railway came together for the first time in Liverpool and Manchester of 1830. Back to answer 1. But here's some historical footage from 1925, the centennial of the Stockton and Darlington Railway, referring to it as the quote, first railway line in the world. And here's an older documentary touching on the first trip on the Stockton and Darlington, quote,
it was the beginning of the railways as we know them.
Back to answer 2. We're going back and forth. We're getting 2 answers. Liverpool and Manchester, Stockton and Darlington. Which railway was it? So I did what any reasonable person would do when Wikipedia and Britannica seemingly disagree. I brought in a neutral third-party arbiter. I asked ChatGPT, and ChatGPT jumped in to help. Which was the first passenger railway, ChatGPT, the Stockton and Darlington, or the Liverpool and Manchester? Quote, the first passenger service train is generally considered to be the Swansea and Mumbles Railway in Wales. ChatGPT, you were supposed to be the chosen one to bring balance to the video, not destroy it. Swansea and Mumbles? That's Harry Potter. That's not real. What the heck is happening? Why can't I just get a straight answer? Why do we find two, seemingly three different answers to the question of the first passenger railway? And corollary to that, who cares and why? Now listen, you might be more clever than me. You might have already caught on to the subtle difference in descriptions from our sources. Good for you. We mere mortals need to parse some words on a little quest. Toot toot, back to the first step on our journey, the Wikipedia page. If you dig into the reference Wikipedia sources, as any user of the greatest work of intellectual altruism in human history should do, you'd find what became source one in my description, Christian Wolmar's 2007 book, Fire and Steam. Wolmar takes a position on this question of the first real railway, quote, the Liverpool and Manchester, which has all the appropriate features to back its claim as the world's first railway. Features is a good frame to get at the truth. Wolmar is saying that the characteristics of modern railway are not properly formed in the earlier railway, the 1825 Stockton and Darlington Railway, but they are fully formed in the later railway, the Liverpool and Manchester Railway of 1830, and therefore Liverpool and Manchester should be considered the true first modern passenger railway. Wolmar's standards here, and I'm trying to characterize it fairly, is that the Stockton and Darlington's primary purpose was to move stuff from mines to water. Its primary purpose was not to move passengers. Second, there were a lot of horses involved for Stockton and Darlington, often more horses than steam locomotives. Moreover, he says, quote, the railway's reliance on subcontracting to the extent that it did not even operate its own passenger service bore little relation to later 19th century railways. The Stockton and Darlington was, he says, a quote, insignificant little operation. Boom, roasted. So, Stockton and Darlington is not the first modern passenger railway because 1, primary purpose moving stuff, not people, 2, more horses than locomotives on the track, 3, passengers, a subcontracted afterthought, and 4, went between towns and not cities. Which to me, characterized a little less fairly, Wolmar is saying, basically, that Liverpool and Manchester Railway was bigger and more fully formed than Stockton and Darlington, so it's the first one for real, because the Stockton and Darlington was so small. In all seriousness, Wolmar's stance that the Liverpool and Manchester Railway is the first real passenger railway is a reasonable position to take. Let's look at it. The Liverpool and Manchester Railway opened on September 15th, 1830, 5 years after the Stockton and Darlington. Its planning required construction of 63 bridges. On opening day, it began, contrary to name, in Manchester and confusingly at the Liverpool Road Station. From Manchester, it traveled west for 30 miles, 50 kilometers, over plateau, hill, and swamp to reach Liverpool. Of course, the line was a 2-track railway, so the reverse was possible from then on. Goods and people could travel from either city to either city. If you traveled the other way, from Liverpool to Manchester, the name Liverpool and Manchester made more sense, and any train-based existential crisis was averted. She was not on the midnight train going anywhere, she was on the noon train going to Manchester. Unlike the Stockton and Darlington, the Liverpool and Manchester was a 2-track, so bi-directional railway, not a single track, and its locomotives were far faster. The rocket locomotive, which won the contract to service the new railway, clocked in with an impressive 36 miles per hour, 58 kilometers per hour, and it was intercity, not just intertown. It was also not envisioned only for material transport, but with passenger travel as a primary component. The railway was designed with both in mind, material and people. Very quickly after opening, Liverpool and Manchester was carrying over 1,000 passengers per day. Remember, the Stockton and Darlington was primarily for material transport with passengers as a, let's say, innovative, if impractical, subcontracted add-on. The Prime Minister, some members of Parliament, an Earl or two, lots of people were there on the opening day of the Liverpool and Manchester Railway because there was a sense that something major was occurring. And of course, they were correct. It was a major upgrade. It was a big deal. So maybe the Liverpool and Manchester is the first real passenger railway because 1, moving stuff and people, primary purpose. 2, steam locomotives on the track, not a bunch of horses. 3 went between cities, not towns. And bonus reason 4, important people from all around thought it was a big deal, not just the locals. When we consider these distinctions, the confusion at the start of this video becomes mostly resolved. When we Googled first passenger railway, Wikipedia said, quote, "The Liverpool and Manchester Railway was the first intercity railway in the world." That's right. First intercity railway. Britannica said the Stockton and Darlington Railway in England was the first railway in the world to operate freight and passenger service with steam traction. That is also factual. Steam traction to carry freight and passengers between towns. So both sources are correct. You might have noticed way back what I didn't at first reading. These sources aren't contradictory. They're simply answering different questions. Wikipedia, the answer of the first intercity railway. Britannica, the answer of the first steam railway with passengers. Neither of those questions were, what was the first modern passenger railway? And it's also a little unfair to that innocent man-child watching the Star Trek rerun who asked, dude, what was like the first passenger train with like passengers and stuff? He did not ask,
dude, what was like the first intercity steam locomotive with the right ratio of horses and no subcontractors?
Answering the true spirit of the question, dude, what was like the first passenger train, requires subjectivity because, well, it's subjective. So let me give you some subjectivity. My opinion. The Stockton and Darlington, not the Liverpool and Manchester, was the first modern passenger railway as we would understand it today. No, it was not perfect and fully formed, but it has all the modern elements. She ain't perfect, but she does tick all the boxes, all the right junk in all the right places, beauty every inch from the bottom to the top. But wait a second, what about the ChatGPT answer? It told us the first passenger train service is generally considered to be the Swansea and Mumbles Railway in Wales. We didn't even consider the Hogwarts Express as a possible answer, so let's do that. The Swansea and Mumbles Railway gives us a new way to answer the question, which was the first passenger railway, by being hyper-specific and technically correct, an internet commenter's favorite type of correct. There were railways before either the Stockton and Darlington or the Liverpool and Manchester, so maybe they were the first passenger railway. If we want to be technically correct, we might dip back a couple decades and consider the Swansea and Mumbles Railway to be the first passenger railway. This railway opened in Wales in 1807 and connected 2 sides of the city. It carried passengers east to west and was even called by the BBC the world's first passenger railway. So why the heck doesn't it count, in my subjective opinion? Well, it was, if you want to be technically correct, it was a rail line and it carried people, but it was pulled exclusively by horses. Exclusively. Is an exclusively horse-drawn carriage really what you imagine when you think of the first passenger railway? The man watching Star Trek was thinking of a spaghetti western train. You know, steam a-floatin' and horns a-tootin'. Remember our 2 other contenders, the Liverpool and Manchester, which was exclusively steam locomotives, and the Stockton and Darlington, which was a mix of steam locomotives and horses. One of those 2 railways subjectively seems a far more satisfactory answer to me. But while we're on the technically correct train, here's another contender for the world's first passenger railway. It's from a few years earlier, and in modern times it's been called the Penydarren Tramroad to be precise. It ran between several ironwork operations in Wales and opened in 1802 to carry people and supplies. Hey, it carried people on a railway, so technically it was the first passenger railway, right? Again, we're only technically correct because, again, the railway was dragged by ye old horses, and the passengers were just workers hitching rides. It wasn't for a ticketed public. So again, it's subjective, but not the first passenger railway as we would imagine it. Okay, as I would imagine it. You can have a different opinion. Let's stay on the technically correct train for one more ridiculous stop. If we really want to annoy our friends who ask us this trivia question, which was the first modern passenger railway as we would understand it, we can do it in 2 ways. First, by making fun of them for asking such a specifically phrased question, and 2, by saying that none of the obvious candidates are the correct answer. Not the Liverpool and Manchester in 1830, not the Stockton and Darlington in 1825, not the Swansea and Mumbles Hogwarts Express in 1807, and not the Penydarren in 1802. It was my simpleton friend, the ancient Greek Diolkos of the roughly dated pre-400s BCE, so like 2,500 years ago. It connected the Peloponnese through a narrow land passageway, the 3.7 miles, 6-kilometer Isthmus of Corinth. This paved portageway allowed ships, likely military but also merchant, to go from one sea to to the next. It's not totally clear how the ships were moved along the line, potentially dragged or wheeled over. Still, it was a two-line track, a rail, if you will. And were anyone on board a ship being dragged along this rail, they were on the track as a passenger, so maybe this is the first railway. All right, I guess I get the point. We have to apply some subjectivity here to get a real final answer. The Greeks didn't use iron, the Penydarren didn't have real passengers, the Swansea and Mumbles didn't have any steam locomotives. That's why they, in my opinion, don't count. The Stockton and Darlington of 1825 had some steam locomotives, pulled both coal and people over long distances. The passenger service was planned before opening. The experimental passenger wagon actually arrived the night before the official opening, so it was part of the plan. And despite the fact that no uppity elites like the Prime Minister or the Earl of Fallacium were in attendance, the people who saw locomotive number 1 set off on September 27th, 1825 for a 26-mile journey thought they were seeing something special, something that might change England, change the world. People gathered to see it go, wore their Sunday best. Before it set off, several men on horseback rode before the locomotive, carrying flags with slogans. One of them read, "Periculum privatum utilitas publica." The private danger is the public good. Once this display ended on horses, the steam horse could take over the galloping. It just shows everyday people knew something was up. So do I. Stockton and Darlington Railway, I hereby declare you the first modern passenger railway. Satisfied me.
What? Huh?
He didn't say anything negative. That's a satisfied customer. We count those. Now we've gotten thoroughly lost in the details here, so let me bring us back to the bigger picture. Who cares and why? Now, some of you out there love trains. Perhaps you'd stop whatever you were doing to just look at one go by on the tracks or listen to the distant horn blaring. But that ain't me, and I assume that ain't most of you watching this. So why should we care? I spent a lunch break recently reading, because I read. I'm so cool. And in the back of my mind, I was trying to figure out why this question inspired me to actually start writing, why it had stuck with me beyond that fleeting moment on the couch with Star Trek. And then I stumbled upon a passage from the author George Saunders. In his book, A Swim in a Pond in the Rain, Saunders asserts that, quote, causation is what creates the appearance of meaning. In this context, he was writing about a Tolstoy short story, but I think it applies here. Learning about a chunk of history, in this case, a chunk of train history, can only be meaningful to us if it is the cause of something we recognize, or if we can infer cause and effect in our own stories from another's experience. The first Kia Sorento rolled off the lot in 2002 isn't meaningful because it didn't cause anything meaningful. Effect without cause is devoid of value. Learning that the telephone was invented in 1876 is insignificant to us without the added context that it caused a revolution in communication, a revolution that at least in part allows you to watch this video while sitting on the toilet. 1876 phone, 20th century mass communication, 21st century toilet entertainment. Cause, effect. Cause and effect give meaning. And aside from extremely siloed academic articles, it's what gives history meaning too. I read Robert K. Massey's book, Catherine the Great: Portrait of a Woman. I even referenced it in a video I made about Catherine's rise to power. There are specific anecdotes in there about how the Russian empress ruled, yes, but there are also insignificant details, at least at first glance, about her love life. At first they seem quite salacious, but we can derive their cause and effect meaning quite quickly. Her love life caused her to have children, had the effect of producing what would become an estranged son who would impact her grip on power and her legacy. That's one obvious meaning. Another is the parallel meaning most of us anticipate receiving when reading biography. What caused this great person to be so great? How can I learn from them? What parallels are there in my life, my struggles? Remove one or both of these cause and effect chains from biography, and you have absolutely no story, and therefore no history. Catherine the Great had a kid. That's an encyclopedia entry. Catherine the Great had an affair with a man named Saltykov, producing a son who would be attributed as the legitimate heir of Peter III and therefore have the effect changing Russia's relationship to its history with Catherine once he took power, thus perpetuating Russia's difficult dialogue with modernization, autocracy, and its approach to the outside world that repeats over and over into the present day. That helps us understand ourselves and understand things we see today that impact our lives. That is story. That is history. Therefore, the reason a boyish question of the first passenger train matters is because of cause and effect. The original route of the Stockton and Darlington Railroad expanded constantly after its formation. The iron tracks grew and grew modernized, altered, and today around 20 miles are still part of the National Railway. It was a seedling that formed a root structure. It was a cause with an effect. And that effect went worldwide. In a lecture I listened to on the Stockton and Darlington, the presenter quoted Horatio Allen in his 1884 book. By railroad era is meant the era commencing with the permanent and successful use of the locomotive on the Stockton and Darlington Railroad in England in the year 1825. That has seen within less than 60 years the iron track laid in so many lands. What started as a coal-moving operation moved so much more than black blobs. And that's why we care. The UK's National Railway started in Stockton and Darlington, and I believe the global age of railways did too. Cause, effect, meaningful history. If this little quest brought you value, consider supporting me on Patreon. Later, y'all.